Hi everyone, my name is Thijs. I'm the technical evangelist at Varnish Software, and I'd like to welcome you to another webinar. It's going to be about private CDN, and as you can see on the slide, I'm not alone. I have someone with me, my dear colleague Adrian Herrera. Adrian, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Tace?
I'm excellent, and I'm actually quite excited to talk about this topic. So can you introduce the topic?
Sure. We're going to be talking about what private content delivery is and why it matters. So I think this is a very relevant topic for today's content delivery market. So looking forward to it.
Me too. Let me start off with a couple of statements. Statements like the fact that the internet is going through a very big shift, or the web specifically is going through a very big shift. I think most of the people watching this have been online for quite a while and have witnessed that shift. If I need to name names and quantify that shift, it's the internet. The web's evolving from a more text-based, website-based internet to a more immersive internet where video is king. And of course, that presents itself with some unique content delivery challenges. Expectations are there from an end user point of view, and the industry at large is also putting in definitions of what this should look like in terms of requirements. Requirements under the form of latency, low latency, that is, doing this at very high throughput. The next generation of videos, we're currently at 4K as somewhat the new normal. 8K is just around the corner. This is going to consume a lot more data, bringing its own unique challenges. And this is happening not at a small footprint, at small scale. This is happening at massive scale. Everyone can interact with content globally, so this is a huge challenge. And if that is not the end of it, technology enablers such as I'm going to name it, of course. It's a buzzword, but it's the one. 5G is only taking that to the next level. And I'm not talking about purely 5G as a technology, but more as a representation, a symbol of what is to come. Expectations that are set, the new normal that is put in place. Now, while that is all great and 5G is considered fast, and it is fast, I've done some tests, you can get great throughput, good latency, works brilliant. That is not the concern. The concern is the good old internet that we need to rely on. And hate to break it to you, but it's already pretty jammed up. I think, I'm not sure if these numbers are still accurate, but 80% of the internet's bandwidth is used for online video. And offloading that network is a key challenge to ensure that you not rely on potential low throughput, indirect routings, latency kicking off. So that is not easy. And even if the network is not the issue, your infrastructure could be the issue. And the infrastructure sometimes can't keep up. And the way we've solved that over the years is simple origin shielding, which means putting a system in front of your origin applications and ensuring it offloads the pressure. It takes away the pressure. And while that is our origin story, there's a lot more to it. Of course, we started in this industry just accelerating websites. And I think the key aspect of it, people tend to forget, is caching. Storing stuff in proverbial boxes for later use so that you no longer put the pressure on the servers for every request. You have the pre-computed result. The data might not change so fast, so you can deliver that. And while that's pretty straightforward, and it has been for a long, long time, now we operate globally. And when you distribute that stuff globally, you typically want to avoid this one, right? The spinning wheel of death. And I think leading up to this call, when we talked about it, you said it best. So I included this slide.
Yeah, there's no way of getting around the speed of light. And essentially, that's what content delivery networks have done. We'll go into the definition of traditional content delivery and then private content delivery. But at the heart of it, it's about getting content as close to where it's being consumed as possible.
And there is a solution for that, or a service that's been invented for that is not new. It's been around for nearly 2 decades. If I get my facts straight, we call it content delivery networks, right?
Of course, of course. Yeah, and I'd like to point out right now that there's two parts of that. There's the content delivery, and then there's the networks, and we'll go into that in a bit.
So please define this for me. What is a content delivery network for those viewers who might not be educated about the topic? Maybe I should put a slide on top of it.
Yeah, so content delivery network, it's a solution for providing reliable online experiences. So I think you led up really well where you showed kind of the text-based website and images. And initially, that's what the internet was. And then once they started moving to rich media, higher resolution images, audio, video, there needed to be a better solution for that was done in a very reliable way so that the customer experience is preserved. And that was managed and enhanced by a third party. These were the CDNs, the content delivery networks. One of the most famous ones is Akamai. And really, it was enabled by the location of the underlying infrastructure. If you take a look at content delivery, it's really a use case for underlying infrastructure. There's servers, there's switches, there's cabling, there's racks, there's power, there's cooling. All that is put together to deliver content in a very reliable and efficient way. And that's really what a traditional content delivery network is.
And I use this imagery of a giant carrying the world. That's pretty much what they've done. They've made the internet seem a lot faster than it really is, because you mentioned it. We're limited by the speed of light. And if we want to truly offer global services, there needs to be some way to offload this. I think jokingly within the company, we sometimes said they have been the perfect plumbers of the internet. And if we can make it so practical and so plastic, one could even say that CDNs are, and I'm oversimplifying it, I know, nothing more than geographically spread caches. They use that same caching principle that we've did originally in the web acceleration world and took that to the next level and spread that geographically and managed that. Now, of course, it's not an easy business, and you've already referred to it, and I'd like to elaborate on it further.
Yeah, I mean, traditional CDNs, they really required large capital investments and complex management. So we need to go back to the late 90s, early 2000s to when, CDNs really were created. And back then, there were a lot of point solutions for infrastructure. You could not combine software and generic servers. A lot of things had to be developed for a specific function. There weren't that many options from a data center perspective. There weren't that many options from a storage perspective. Web serving, network, firewalls, routing. It goes on and on. This isn't meant to be an exhaustive list, but it's just meant to show just how complex this really was and the level of investment that's really needed, because you not only have to stand this up in a single location. We spoke about the speed of light. You have to try to get as close to the user as possible. So CDNs made this investment globally in different regions, and the largest ones were able to support various regions, and we call that points of presences. But it's all about what Tay spoke about at the beginning: getting the content as close to the user as possible.
And they made life easy there. And I think a lot of users were very happy to give up control, because running this type of business is not simple. We've seen it. And you have to have your presence in all the key locations. And if you're a truly global player, that means nearly everywhere, every continent, a lot of countries. So people were very happy to give that up and say, you know what? And that's also part of that mentality of, I remember I started my career in 2004, and it was already a big deal. Outsourcing as a service. I think the advent of the cloud and virtualization accelerated that. We were taught that everything that is not core business, push it away and use it as a service. And I think CDN providers have ran with it successfully. And you can see the key points here. The reason why they gave that up is because in order to manage this, there is a significant time to market. In order to shorten that time to market, you gave it away to CDN players. Also, simplicity. You've emphasized this, and the list you saw with all the aspects, the key components you need to put in place to make this happen. Simplicity is key. So if you could escape that, then you're in good shape. And then, of course, the end goals of these types of services, making sure that everything's responsive and resilient, making sure your website or your video streaming solution or whatever you're running, your application, is fast, is responsive, and is resilient, regardless of the situation, regardless of the circumstances. But it sounds brilliant, right? And it's a good industry, but there have been issues along the way.
Yeah, and that's what's leading to these new challenges of today. So of course, one thing that I think we also need to mention is the business model, right? That it was an OpEx business model, service-based business model. That's along the simplicity lines. It makes it very easy to sign on and use traditional CDNs. But what's going on today is that the CDN space is consolidating. This is leading to issues. We spoke about content delivery being a use case for underlying infrastructure. What content delivery networks are finding is that there are higher margin services that they can provide on that infrastructure, or the margin that they're currently getting on that infrastructure does not support the business like it used to. So there's a lot of things happening in the market. So there's a consolidation. Some organizations, very large organizations, are exiting the content delivery space. They're still focused on other solutions, other services, but they're exiting the content delivery space. That means that there is more competition for the same CDN services. Again, when you're focused on higher margin products, that's also where your product development goes. So, those that are focused on content delivery are no longer innovating from a content delivery perspective. And when you combine those two, more competing for the same services, lower innovation, there's just the potential for more congestion and potential outages. You know, the more congestion comes from more organizations competing for the same services, not only small organizations, but larger organizations that do have purchasing power. And if you're an economist, you can brush off and dust off that old economics book case and take a look at the law of supply and demand. When supply goes down or remains constant and demand increases, as we know, demand increases. Everyone just needs to look at their own home, all the devices that they have, all the applications, all the TVs that they have that are now connected to the internet. Demand is just increasing. So ultimately, content delivery service prices will go up. So that leads us to how do we fix these issues? What's the solution?
Well, there's another thing I want to talk about is in the way we're presenting it. It seems like the smaller companies are suffering, whereas the big ones are gaining. But in my opinion, it's also a double-edged sword because the pricing they apply is probably consumption based. So if you're at that apex level, I mean, pricing isn't linear; it just goes up and up and up. So if you're at that apex level, you could be spending millions of dollars a month purely on content delivery. If we solely look at it from a pricing perspective. So I agree that we need to look at this, and we have looked at this, and other companies have looked at this, and there is a need for private content delivery, and that's more of the topic we wanna venture into today, because private content delivery is very interesting, and while it is not for everyone, it's not a turnkey solution. Sometimes it does offer real significant value. You want to touch on that?
It does. It does. So, we opened up with the definition of a traditional CDN, and this is the definition of content delivery. This webinar is what is private content delivery and why it matters. So, this is what private content delivery is. It's a solution for reliable or providing reliable online experiences, infrastructure and software managed by you or a third party. We'll show you what that means in a bit, and you select the flexibility, price, and level of control. So, what we're saying is it isn't a wholesale shift to private content delivery. You can combine private content delivery with what you're currently doing today, but you gain these benefits, you gain control. And this is what the webinar is about. We're going to jump into it right now.
Absolutely, and the hybrid nature of this is going to be talked about extensively throughout. But before we continue, I do want to unpack one of the terms we mentioned here, which is key, is the reliable online experiences. What does that mean? And I try to quantify that. I try to create a list of aspects and things that fit under that umbrella. Reliable online experiences. Well, I mentioned it in the beginning, the need for low latency. And we hear sometimes that in content delivery, low latency doesn't really matter, but it does, right, Adrian?
Yeah, that one, it always rubs me the wrong way when I hear other CDNs and other professionals in the space saying, well, we don't really have a request for latency. We don't have a request for low latency. Yet they talk about buffering and they talk about, controlling the experience. And it, low latency is incredibly important to us, and I think to preserving the online experiences. And it needs to be really looked at every step of the tech stack, from when the bits are stored to the disk all the way to when they're delivered through the subsystem to the NIC, from the NIC over the network, throughout the different ISPs, ultimately to the client. If you can do that in a very efficient way, then you're able to save money, not just in the underlying infrastructure, but you're also able to provide and preserve those real reliable, responsive online experiences. So, that's why we're so super
Yeah,
focused on it. Yeah.
and it's interesting because we have this mission statement, this term we use, live without latency. We put it on our, we have ads about it. We put it in big on our booths at trade shows. And for some reason, it does attract people. They come to our booth and ask us, tell us more about low latency. So despite it apparently not being important, it is important. And with I talk to people in that industry. You talk to them. Live video is very sensitive to latency. Sports is the ultimate example of that. If we don't control that, then the quality of experience deteriorates. And I'm mentioning them separately, like low latency, high throughput, high concurrency. I think one leads to the other. If you have high throughput and high concurrency, it could add to the low latency. Of course, it's not simple, it's complicated. But what we're practically doing is trying to offload the network like content delivery does, right? You have caches distributed globally and you put them as close to your user so that the access network is pretty close. Maybe you're connected to some sort of backbone that allows you to have very low latency in a specific region to ensure that you don't have to go transatlantic or to the other side of the country. And while you're doing that, you're also offloading the infrastructure. Because not only are we slicing up the network, we're ensuring that your origin infrastructure, which can be sensitive to super high traffic, doesn't tumble and crash. So it's important. And in the end, it's a story of availability and resilience. And while it is very similar to the message of traditional CDNs, you do have to ask yourself the question, like, why are we going private? And I think money is everything, right? Predictable cost, or doing it cheaper, doing it more efficiently. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and this is what we hear from our customers. And again, we've been doing private content delivery for many years now. But I think one of the most important is the predictable cost. They have offloaded things to different service providers, to the cloud, and now those bills that once were low are getting high, and they're very difficult to control. You go to your provider and you ask for a discount. It really depends on who you are. They may or may not give it to you. Resilience is another big aspect here. A lot of the times, certain CDN providers, traditional or modern CDNs, they just don't have points of presence where you need them. We spoke about the initial web experience being text-based and image-based. Well, now it's application-based. It's just video-based and application-based. When you have those different applications in different areas, they're not only running on computers, they're running on mobile devices, they're running on TVs, they're running on connected devices. So the simplicity that traditional and modern CDNs initially provided now becomes very complex because everything's bespoke and you need to customize things. So resilience is part of being able to customize and integrate. It's that fifth bullet point there. There's an aspect of that under resilience too. And then
but you talked about coverage there.
Oh yeah,
you mentioned coverage.
I hit like a lot of those 4 points. Yeah, I kind of mixed them up there.
But coverage is key. You talked about CDNs not having any points of presence in very specific regions, but it's also about only needing a very select region where you're active in. I've had conversations with people who are active in the UK, and in terms of points of presence, they only care about London and Manchester. I've heard these stories about a streaming provider active in Italy, where in the north of Italy you have plenty of data centers and availability and potentially CDN resources, but when you go to the south, then that's few and far between, and they decided to build it themselves because there was nothing. So I think coverage and the flexibility you have in the coverage you offer is a key element of private CDN. And that adds to the next points that we put there, right? More control. Yeah. I think that is the key message we hear from our clients, from the industry people we talk to. We want more control, we want more transparency, and we want more observability in what's happening here from a variety of reasons, right? Just as an organization, but maybe from a regulatory point of view, like it ties into a lot, right? It's all about control. Do you hear that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It is all about control. It's gaining that control and being able to provide the experience you want where you want it. And before that was controlled by the CDN, by the network. They put in a particular location. So that's why POPs and the location of POPs are always such a big selling proposition for CDNs. Now you can control that, and we'll show you how in the next few slides. There's a lot of options now on how you deploy private
Yeah,
content
yeah, yeah.
delivery.
Because people want to customize that because a private CDN is a product. It's a good product. We're not discounting that. We're not discrediting that. But some people need customizations way beyond the product. And if you're not an A-list client, you're not going to be able to influence that roadmap. So being able to integrate your own services in there, and of course having that efficiency guarantee, that's also one of the reasons. And that's definitely something we're going to cover. So
Good.
yes, maybe you already have infrastructure in place. Maybe you already have the network in place. And I think that applies to a lot of telcos we talk to. They have CDN solutions and they pay top dollar for stuff that goes through their own network. So yeah, that's something they can handle better. So what they probably need, and maybe that's a bit of a cheap one here for me, maybe just adding our logo here.
Hmm.
We offer software for that. And I think that's important. We're not the only one. If we want to be honest about this is an emerging market. We're a player of it, a key player, if I may say, but we're not the only one. There, it's an industry that's only going to get bigger, and you're only going to hear more about it. But if we go back to your list of elements that make this or used to make this a very complicated thing to do yourself, it could be bare metal, right? And a set of appliances, and uh, you have to buy that in, and there's serious capex involved. I think the way we do it and the way the industry demands us to do it is very much of the times, right? Very flexible. Everything is software defined. And I think that's our main value here. Our main advantage is we're purely software. You can deploy it wherever you want, however you want. And maybe those expensive appliances are no longer required. You can run it on commercial off the shelf hardware. And that's huge, right?
Yeah, it's a very important point. It is. And again, you're able to select and control your cost by selecting the underlying server infrastructure and the performance of that underlying server infrastructure.
But it goes way beyond that. Like
It
I
does.
particularly like this point, and I'd like you to make it because it's, in my humble opinion, a very inspiring one.
Yeah, I mean, your deployment options, you've never had as many deployment options that you have today. Again, we'll start on the right side. You can buy your own servers, and if you have your own data center network, as you opened up with, provide your own private content delivery network. A lot of the times the telcos have this. That's why telcos, a lot of them use private content delivery networks. But you can go one level up and maybe you just want to buy the servers and you want to co-locate those servers in a data center. You have that option. You have a lot of organizations focused on bare metal as a service where you can either lease or just go ahead and put down your credit card and get access to dedicated infrastructure in an as a service location that includes bandwidth. You can go all the way to using the hyperscalers and spinning up images, with this private content delivery software. And as always, you can integrate with what you're currently doing. We're not saying replace the CDNs. We have a lot of respect for the CDNs. They've done the internet a huge service, but now we see that market dynamics. There is a time to bring certain functionality back into the data center, wherever that data center is, whether you control it, whether it's with a hyperscaler, whether it's co-load. Your options have never been so great, or you've never had so many options.
Exactly.
That's a better way to put it. Yeah.
No, and it's important to specify that at some extent, we're competing with the companies on that mentioned on the left hand side, but we also partner with them in certain cases. We have clients of ours who mix and match, and we're working with these companies, and we're happy to. So this is not us trying to discredit them. Definitely not. I think we praised them throughout, and we'll continue to do that. Now, if you have that underlying deployment infrastructure and the flexibility needs depend, right? Colo, build it yourself, bare metal as a service, maybe managed hosting with VMs, hyperscalers, you name it. Then of course we need to run the software on it, the content delivery software, and that's our specialty. Now, for the longest of time, we've provided the solution on the left-hand side, which is the engine of the content delivery, our caching solution, Varnish. But as time progressed and as we did tons of integrations with plenty of our clients, we saw a recurring pattern and a need to integrate this into a sort of a turnkey solution, if I may say so. So there's a Varnish Enterprise is no longer purely the cache. It's an umbrella term that covers multiple products. Of course, the engine for caching, for edge compute, for customization, for security. It's the touch point for the end users. It's what is on the edge. It's what people interact with. But of course, if you put multiple points of presence in a private CDN, of course, all of that needs to be managed. And doing that individually or developing yourself is not efficient. So that's why we developed the Varnish controller, which is the control plane that facilitates the management of the server, that facilitates edge compute logic, deployments of caching logic, also monitoring, all those aspects that make the control of a farm of servers a lot easier. But you don't have a CDN unless you can ensure that end user requests are routed to the right server. And we've tackled that as well with our proprietary Varnish traffic router, which is very advanced and very specialized for the type of workloads that we're processing here. It is specifically built for content delivery. So all of that together allows you to just run a software-defined content delivery network yourself, either purely private or in a hybrid way. And it's not just about putting some servers out there. It is a story of efficiency. And I think we can be very proud of this one. You were involved in that from a more strategic point of view. Can you tell the story here?
Yeah, so we've been working with Intel for many, many years, optimizing for the Xeon platform. And the reason we're doing that, it goes back to moving content efficiently through the system, all the way from the disk through the subsystem to the NIC. We're able to do that in an incredibly efficient way, leveraging a lot of the advancements that Intel has done to the Xeon platform over time. So, the efficiencies that we show here, we currently hold the most throughput from a single server. This is all in a 2U server, 1.3 terabits per second per server in a 2U server. That was just unheard of about a year ago. And we're doing that in a very efficient way, 1.17 gigabits per second per watt. I know those are technical terms. We throw those out. But what that means for the user is being able to deliver more from a less footprint. We're going to show you what that looks like in a bit. But one thing I did want to point out while we're still on this slide is the full report is attached to this webinar. So you can read the Intel report and take a look at how we ran this test, what the benchmarks were, what the results were, and more importantly, what we get from other Xeon platforms, maybe older servers, not so current, not so expensive. I'd say that this was a pretty fast and new server, but what we saw was that 1 gigabit per second per watt was consistent throughout the different Xeon lines. So we do encourage you to download that attachment. And on the next slide, Tace.
And the efficiency, but I do want to elaborate further. The efficiency here is key. I mean, it's an efficiency game here. It's the name of the game. And the way we got that, of course, was thanks to Intel and their advancements in the new Xeon platforms, but also our collaboration, because we also adapted our software. Because our software, it's not like you can drop any type of software on that hardware and it will run as fast. No, we are known for being super efficient. And together with Intel, we partnered and looked at how we can take that to the next level continuously. Our first test didn't yield 1.3 terabits per second. Our first test was way lower. But as we work with core engineers at Intel, we reached that efficiency level. That is something that should matter to you, be it from a financial point of view, from an electricity consumption point of view, lower footprint hardware point of view, which we'll touch in a second, or just your sustainability goals. I mean, we've surpassed 1 gigabit per second per watt, which is a big deal. And that brings us to this one, right, Adrian?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what it means from an overall throughput perspective. If you have 13 systems with a 200 gigabit per second target, you can collapse those down to just 2 systems and hit your 1 terabit per second target. So it's about reducing the data center footprint. When you do that, you reduce your power and cooling needs. So it really makes sense to upgrade your servers because it's such a dramatic decrease in the footprint, such a dramatic increase in the efficiency of power utilization that it just makes financial sense to upgrade your systems. Or you install our software and you extract more, you get more efficient delivery of content on existing servers, specifically Xeon servers.
And that's important. That's important. If you have hardware that's not yet end of life, but that is ready to use, that you haven't used for other use cases, please do. When they're end of life and you're considering buying new hardware, we've mentioned that this is very expensive hardware, but Intel even has reports in which they show that the total cost of ownership can be lower if you go for that expensive rig. And I think, will that be shared as well, Adrian? Yeah.
It'll
So
be shared in a different webinar, different report coming up. But yeah, absolutely, it does make sense. Ultimately, it makes what you want to do is make sure you look for private content delivery software that really focuses on power efficiency and moving the bits and delivering the bits in the most efficient way. I mean that's at the heart of this.
and it didn't used to be a factor, power consumption, but now, like the last couple of years, it's been on the top of every executive's agenda, and we're really happy to go that route. So with all those messages and all those talking points we presented to you, I think before we dive into the examples, we can make an initial conclusion. So
Sure. I mean,
it's a matter of cost.
yeah, this starts to get to the heart of why private content delivery matters. It's really about control. You can control cost, you can control responsiveness, you can control resilience, right? You find the right mix of price and performance for your business model, for your needs, for your budget. You deploy with the required functionality where needed. That's very important. Wherever you need. This is about getting content delivery as close to the end user, your end user, as possible. And then you select the security and redundancy required. Certain regions may not need to be redundant. Certain use cases may not need to be redundant. Certain use cases, as we talked about, regulatory and compliance reasons, may need to be incredibly secure and locked down within an air gap network within your own organization. So private content delivery is about providing that control, putting that control back into your hands.
Which brings us to some practical examples in which we illustrate that this is very much relevant. And
Yeah.
before we start, I want to say that, of course, we're going to present some of our clients and how they do things, but not exclusively. We do want to show that
Yeah.
this is becoming more mainstream. I think maybe the origin use case, Netflix, right, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, again, let's read that disclaimer. We do not provide content delivery solutions to Netflix, but you need to take a look at what Netflix has done in the space, and us in the content delivery space have nothing but respect for Netflix and Open Connect. And what Open Connect is all about is getting Netflix content as close to where it's consumed as possible. They are using a lot of the different features and functions and tactics and techniques that we spoke about, and they've been at the forefront of this approach for a very long time. And I think we can argue that it probably made them who they are today. The underlying infrastructure, the fact that they can provide such a great experience to their end users in a very, very consistent way. Of course, it's also about the content. They have great content. Uh, but what would that content be if people were just sitting, waiting, and watching a buffer?
Exactly,
Drain.
exactly.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, we've competed with Netflix for a while of who's the fastest in terms of content delivery, and that's why I want to mention that, like, while we can provide 1.3 terabits per second on a single machine, and that is unparalleled at this point, while we were going or reaching that number, sometimes Netflix overtook us, and it's entirely possible that they'll overtake us again. It's entirely possible. So just goes to show that this is a very valid use case and a very valid business.
Exactly. And it shows you how critical it is to those where content delivery is strategic. And I think everyone has experienced the quality of Netflix. So it shows you how effective private content delivery is.
Maybe throw in another one.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this one.
Yeah, this is one that people may not think about. When you think of content delivery, you don't automatically think Tesla. But you go to their website, you sit in their cars, and you see software, a lot of UIs, a lot of video, especially on their website. And they are using Varnish to provide the video and the data and the images on their website. They started, back in 2013, 2014, to try to find solutions to be able to control their content delivery costs. And they had a few requirements. They wanted to use existing infrastructure. They wanted persistent storage because they had these very large video files. They wanted the ability to pick storage based upon the application, visibility of data. They wanted to make it visible so that their administrators can figure out what's going on if there are any issues, and they wanted to be able to control their network. I think you think of Tesla, you probably do think of control. It's a closed system, and again, you can see what they've done with that control. They are one of the most advanced organizations. They are probably the most advanced transportation organization on the planet. And again, private content delivery was key to what they were trying to do. And you can see the benefits
At
there,
multiple
controlling content
levels.
delivery. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a one trick pony. Like you can use it
Yep.
for software updates. You can use it to accelerate the purchase of cars. I know they even use it within their organization for offloading specific applications. So there is a lot of use cases. I want to throw in a last one before we wrap this up.
Sure.
I'm going to talk about this one. This is Telia, which is a big Scandinavian telco, and they're a good client of ours. We've been working with them for a long time. And during the IBC trade show, where we had a presence, where we had a booth, I did a chat with them on our stage for our audience. It was actually very interesting what they had to say. So while they're very dominant in the Nordics, like in most Nordic countries, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, as an as a telco, it's not just about providing internet connectivity and phone and digital TV. Like there's a big shift to OTT happening, and I think every telco is experiencing that. And in order to deliver traditional TV solutions, which are part of their triple play package, to the end user, they needed to think about content delivery. And they had a private content delivery solution prior to teaming up with us, but that couldn't scale to their needs. They wanted to re-architect it and stumbled upon limitations. They talked to us. We're fully software based, and that gave them the opportunity to leverage one of their existing relationships with a hardware vendor and roll that out on very commercial, off-the-shelf hardware, very standard, and that allowed them to advance. So their key message is having full control, observability, and reducing or at least controlling the cost. And it's an interesting client because they're actually the ones pushed us back in the day to go beyond 150 gigs a second. So as mentioned, we didn't reach that 1.3 terabits on the spot. It was a progression with multiple iterations. And I remember back in the day, they said, okay, good, 150 gigabits is great, but for us, it's not enough on a single node. We wanted to take that to the next level. Can you look at that? And we did. And we took their input, took their use case, made some architectural changes in our software. And then I think the next iteration was 200 gigs a second. Then we went to 500 gigs, then to 800, and now we're like in 1.3 terabit territory. So you see it goes to show that interacting with your client, having a good relationship could really take your game to the next level. Because for them, it was about taking full advantage of the network. They really wanted to get the most out of this. As you can see here in the last bullet point, they have capacity up to 5 terabits per second. So for them, lowering that infrastructure need and having better efficiency is great because they operate, look, their coverage is across 4 countries. And within those 4 countries, they have 18 points of presence that they built out. In cities that aren't A markets, it's not the San Franciscos and the Singapores and the Dublins of this world. It's specific cities in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. So I found that to be a very good use case. We have a very good relationship with them. And that chat we had at IBC was eye-opening. So I guess we can wrap up now. I think we've made a lot of good points. I think it's time to reiterate and tell people what the true value is. Can you do that?
Yeah. So again, the title of the webinar is "What is Private Content Delivery and Why It Matters?" And this is why it matters, right? You get flexibility, value, efficiency, and resilience. So you can deploy anywhere and reach anyone. You can grow your audience while lowering costs and supporting new use cases. You stay online, secure your service, and ultimately deliver more while reducing footprint and power utilization. So, that's why private content delivery matters. And I think we've given some examples of organizations that have been able to apply this from a strategic perspective.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we're like almost 40 minutes in and we can keep talking about that, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. We just wanted to introduce that emerging industry and our role in it. And I hope as an audience, you feel satisfied with what you've seen. Maybe you've learned a thing or two. Maybe it inspired you. So anyway, if you want to reach out to us, if you want to hear more, varnishsoftware.com, you'll find everything there. Any closing statements there, Adrian?
Yeah, I just want to point out the attachments. We do have the Intel third-party benchmark. So it was done by Intel, approved by Intel Legal. So we encourage you to go take a look at that, download that. And we also have some other use cases. We covered, a non-varnish use case in Netflix, 2 varnish use cases in Tesla and Telia. But we have 2 others for organizations that aren't as big as those organizations. Well, some is, we have a Tele2 use case and an RTE use case. So We encourage you to download those and review those on your own. And of course, if you have any questions, please visit varnish-software.com, click on Talk to an Expert, and we have experts just waiting to discuss your unique challenges with you. And that's it.
That's it. Couldn't say it better. Adrian, thanks for hanging out with me. I fully enjoyed it. I hope you, dear viewer, as a member of the audience, enjoyed it as well. And we'll see you next time for more similar content. Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.